Man's cruelty is unbounded. Whether consciously or unconsciously, we have contributed to the misfortune of many. Here's a story about a boy named Keith and a friend he made in the unlikeliest of places at the most unexpected time. Keith was in his first year of university, pursuing an undergraduate degree of mechanical engineering, when he had to visit an automobile factory for 4 days as part of his course requirement. The day was sunny and bright as he waited outside the bus for everyone to board. He snacked on a bar of Snickers meanwhile and threw the wrapper on the ground. "Not on the ground, Keith," his friend George admonished. "You're littering." "It's fine," Keith shrugged it off. "They're going to clean it up anyway." George shook his head at him and they both boarded the bus. The factory was situated in the northern part of Maine and was about 240,000 square feet in size. It produced 150,000 units of auto parts annually and was one of the largest factories in the country. Keith was amazed by the sheer size and complex machinery. He spent the day learning about stamping, molding, welding, and painting and was exhausted by the time he had returned to the lodging for the night. On his way back to the bus, he noticed a pair of eyes watching him from the woods adjacent to the factory. Keith faintly recalled the fact that Maine was a heavily forested state and a lot of trees had to be cut down in order to build the large factory. He tried ignoring the eyes watching him through the trees and catching up with his friends, but something inside him wanted to find out who or what was looking at him so curiously. Eventually, he gave in to the urge and ventured into the forest. He walked in the direction of the watchful eyes, but as soon as he entered the thicket, they vanished. There was nothing there but tall and dense trees. Keith wandered around in the hopes that whatever it was would seek him out again. A few minutes later, he was in the midst of the forest, surrounded by giant, frightening trees that made it hard for him to see where he was going. Keith was about to turn around and head back when he heard a low, menacing growl. His heart jumped to his throat as a shape stepped out from behind a bush just a few feet away. Thin and emaciated was a shaggy brown coat. It was a coyote, starved and rabid. The animal approached him with his teeth bare and claws out. Keith backed a step and stumbled over a stone, landing on his rear. The coyote came sprinting at him before he could stand up. Keith scrambled backwards with his hands and feet. That coyote jumped and he shielded himself with a hand and cried for help. The animal never landed on him. He heard a thud and a roll followed by a sound of snapping jaws. Keith turned around to watch as a small gray dog bravely fought the coyote and chased it out of the thicket. He sat there stunned by the dog's kindness and courage as it padded over to his side and gave his cheek a tiny lick. Keith noticed that the dog had lovely brown eyes and gasped in realization. These were the same eyes that had been watching him earlier. Touched, he gave the dog a hug for saving his life and brought it back to the lodging with him. He spent the next days at the factory with the dog and played with it often. They became quite inseparable. Keith named the dog Miracle, and everyone in his class adored the dog. He learned from some of the workers that Miracle lived in the woods and visited the factory often. Her family, sadly, had died some time ago of sickness, so she was all alone now. Keith decided he was going to take her back home with him. He loved the dog, but he quickly took note of something strange about her. Miracle never ate anything he gave her. At lunchtime, while Keith and his friends ate, Miracle wandered off to the back of the building. The same pattern repeated on the third day as well. She was never hungry around him. On the morning of his last day at the factory, Miracle was nowhere to be found. Keith searched everywhere in the lodging and then at the factory and the woods. His friends searched with him. After an entire morning spent looking for her, Keith remembered Miracle's habit of disappearing to the backyard at lunch. So he went back of the building, where they dumped their scrap and picked his way through discarded auto parts and metal till he reached a place where the factory workers threw their food waste. The dumpster was overflowing, leftovers and plastic packets of meals littering the ground. And among all that trash laid his beloved dog, wheezing her last few breaths. Keith rushed toward Miracle and picked her up in his arms. There was blood and vomit splattered on the ground where she'd lain. He hurriedly took her to the nearest vet, but she died on the way there. Keith later learned that Miracle had been eating the remains of the food the workers carelessly discarded in the yard, consuming the plastic wrappers as well when she couldn't properly extract the food from the packaging. She never accepted any of the treats Keith offered her because of the toxic amount of plastic in her gut that made her feel constantly full. She only ever ate in the afternoon, and she was used to eating the workers' refuse. And in the end, it was a sandwich wrapping that Miracle had accidentally inhaled that eventually choked the dog and killed her. Miracle's death broke Keith's heart. He went back home with the vow that he will not let another animal meet the same gruesome end. That year, he joined the animal rights organization in his university and actively began campaigning for proper disposal of plastic and other toxic industrial and human wastes. 100 million marine animals die each year from plastic waste alone. 100,000 marine animals die from getting entangled in plastic yearly, and this is just the number of animals we find. Say no to plastic. Act now and save lives.